With the help of Hashem, we are learning Chagiga Daf Chaf Vav. We are now learning the second to last Daf in the Masechta. We actually left off on Daf Chaf Hey Amid Beis, 18 lines before the bottom of the Amid. The goal will be to go until more or less the bottom of Daf Chavav Amid Aleph, like this. The final Daf Chav Zayin, which is really a very, not even an Amid, we'll have our hour more or less that's dedicated for the learning for the final Daf of Chagiga. Okay, Chevra, so we began the Mishnah on Daf Chav Dalid Amid Beis, Behemshech, and in contrast to the Chomer B'Kodesh over Truma. So we began to learn the irony that sometimes it's 180 degrees opposite, that there is a Chomer by Truma over Kodesh. So we're going to start today by concluding that sugya regarding the ne'emanus of the Am Ha'aretz, regarding the tahara of the kachim and of the truma. And Chevra, the final case in the Mishnah was regarding the kalim, that if there was food to be set aside later for kodesh, remember that final din in the Mishnah, so from 70 days prior to Yom Tov, which is normally the time from when people began to toivel their kalim, from then on, those kalim are already tarred. So we're going to conclude that sugya. We're going to have the Mishnah on Daf Chafei Amid Beis that's going to teach us another area where we are more stringent regarding Truma, more than by Kodesh. And to appreciate that Mishnah, let's speak the intro right now. A couple of details, a couple of rules. Background rules, context rules. Kodim Kol, Chazal at some point made an Isur to build and to use a kiln, which is the types of furnaces in which they would make a proper earthenware utensil in Yerushalayim proper, because these factories gave off a lot of dark smoke, and there's a beauty, the most beautiful city in the world is Yerushalayim HaKodesh, a lot connected to Avnei Yerushalayim, and they didn't want for the stones of Yerushalayim to become darkened from a kiln. Number two, Klicheres, I know we're living in a new world today. Today we don't have a challenge with utensils, and we have disposable utensils that look fancy. They didn't have it then. The most affordable utensil that people would use then would be an earthenware utensil. When it comes to using kalim for the eating of kachim, many people would use earthenware utensils, but here there's a big issue. There's something called noisar. Noisar means that everything connected to kachim has a very short expiration date, a halachic expiration date. So let's say we bring a carbon shlamim, a yisrael, and we eat the meat in Yerushalayim, and we use the regular, these are called the small earthenware utensils, not the big ones, the ones that people used to eat, cups, plates, other such utensils. We can use them for kachim, but don't forget that it's only a one-time use. That's as close as a disposable keli as you'll get. Why? Because since you cannot kash it, take out the tam that went inside a klei cheres. We know this nowadays concerning another halach of kashrus. If a klei cheres, here in LA it's very common, people have in their kitchens, they have these ceramic tiles. You can never kasher it, because you cannot fully get rid of the tam that's nivla. By kachim, the tam of kachim, which is the holiest tam in the world, is only the holiest up until when you may no longer eat it. So even though shlamim you have 2 days and 1 night, but after 2 days, the tam is noisar, and therefore they would have to break that utensil. And by the way, now, I just read recently, we know exactly where the Mishkan Shiloi stood, because they find, and there was no, like in Yerushalayim, you can eat kachim kalam in the whole Yerushalayim. Shiloi, where did they eat the kachim? From any area where they can see the Mishkan. And now, when they make excavations, the areas that you can see the site of the Mishkan, you'll find broken shards buried in the ground. If you go over the hill, you won't find any of such a thing, because that was like outside of Yerushalayim. So B'kitzur, there was a need and there was a shortage of klicheres. In other words, if you can manufacture them, is good. Since you were not allowed to manufacture them in Yerushalayim, now you were allowed to manufacture them right outside the city, but still there was a limitation. And people would use them, and you would have to break them. So Chazal were lenient regarding the klei cheres, the small klei cheres, the ones that people used when they ate, of amaratzim, that they had ne'emanus. But where min ha-moidi'in v'lifnim, moidi'in is around 15 mil, close to Yerushalayim. Once you go not in the city itself, we'll see the status of the city in the Gemara, but from the inside, That means once, if you're going from outside Yerushalayim towards Yerushalayim, once you go beyond Moedian, now you are even closer to Yerushalayim. From there all the way up until the Beis Hamikdash, there was Nemanus on the Am Ha'aretz regarding Kachim, but not regarding Truma.
Maybe even Moedian from today.
Maybe Moedian from today is more or less the same place. Mamish. Yeah. Okay, so that's going to be another Chumrah that you're going to find by Truma over Kachim. And we're going to have on Daf Chavav another Mishnah that's going to quote the final two Chumras from Truma over Kodesh. And to understand that, we'll speak more when we get into the Gemara, but there is a klal that we have in many other areas as well, known as Hapesha Asar Hu Hapesha Hitir, which means that even when there is a scenario where someone halachically is not 100% trusted in a certain area, if they are the ones that introduce a certain scenario, without that knowledge, b'chlal, there's no issue. They are the ones that brought that issue up to the forefront, and then they say that this happened like this or like that. They give another nuance detailed based on their nuance detail. There's also not a problem. Then you have no problem, because like mimanavshach, either don't believe them at all, but if it becomes asid because of them, so we say the mouth that made it asid has to be believed when they add something which makes it mutter. We'll see how that would relate to some of the topics that we are learning about right now. And finally, will be really the reason why are we learning all of these dinim in Masechtas Chagiga? Because Chagiga is about Yom Tif. And now we'll learn today, and that's going to go into the final daf, that Chazal said that during Yom Tif, all Tumah of Am Ha'aretz is suspended. Which everyone is considered halachically tar when it comes over Yom Tov, which is really great. I mean, just learning about these dinim, and it's so important. We are about to witness the coming of Mashiach. We're going to start practicing these dinim. And everyone realizes when they start learning these dinim that there's going to be, to a certain degree, a separation between a chaven and the Am Ha'aretz. Just like there is now a separation between people that eat kosher and people that don't eat kosher. I know that, we are Chabad house, we are familiar with it. You're getting people closer to Yiddishkeit. Many of them are not yet kosher eating. And that's the way it is. It's a barrier. There's going to be another barrier which has to be overcome. Now eventually everyone is going to learn the dinim and everyone is going to keep the dinim the same. But until we get there, this is a big part of Yiddishkeit that we will practice. And imagine what would happen over Yom Tov if the takanas chachamim that the Am Ha'aretz proper, the body, their kalim, their food generally are considered tummy. I know midrabanan, but so what? That makes a separation. So Chaverim Kol Yisrael is that over Yom Tov, everyone has the status of Tahara and their kalim and their food, but it doesn't mean, now what does that mean? So just to speak out a little bit, to get excited, to go ahead of ourselves. So let's say you are a Chaver and you have a store and you open up a package of flour. People come and they buy flour. They would buy flour not every pre-packaged today. They would stick their hands and their kalim inside your flour. Okay. Over Yom Tov, you got no problem. How do we treat that flour right after Yom Tov? In other words, the suspension of Tumas HaMa'aretz was only during the Regel. What happens the day after?
Flour,
Kemach, because Kemach, Shleima, if it wasn't Nishmar Mishas Aktsira, like for Pesach, then it became susceptible normally at one point prior to you making it into flour, and the HaMa'aretz that touches it will be Matamit.
Oh, we wait 70 days afterwards?
Waiting 70 days is not connected to this. We'll go to these details. So that's a be a machlokes tanoim. Because don't forget, it's not that they said they're not tummy. They said that they're tummy, but they cannot impart tumah. They suspended their tumah. But there's going to be a svara to say that after Yom Tov, retroactively, in other words, it's not, they didn't touch the flour Isru Chag. But we know that during Cholamoyed, they were in the shop. So during Yom Tov, everyone can eat it. What do we do with it afterwards in these types of topics and much, much more? So Chevra, we left off again on Daf Chaf, Hey, Amid Beis, 18 lines.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
Was there a distinction halachically between Hamaretz and the people who are not Hamaretz, besides what we relate to today? Was there a specific ruling that
Yeah, there were.
you know you were a Hamaretz?
No, how do you know? We're not going to get into it right now, but the two areas where we differentiated between a Chaven and Am Ha'aretz was number one regarding Tum and Tara, and number two regarding tithing. One thing is important. It's not that we had the presumption that they Bechlal didn't separate Truma from Maasros. That's very wrong. They separated Truma whatever, there's a lot of nuance. Certain things for sure they did. Certain things, the majority of them did, but the minority that didn't was enough for us to make a takana that when we buy produce from them, we have to have a chashash that maybe they didn't fully tithe it. We call that produce demai, from meduma, mixture, a rabbinic mixture, and we needed to take certain steps that are a little bit complicated, not for now.
Did they know they were not doing it?
They knew they were not doing it, correct. And as we see today, the Chachamim, this is all during the times of the second Beis HaMikdash, were very wise, and they never enacted something that made them feel so so separated, disenfranchised, that they went ahead and they made their own groups. No, it was done perfect. It was done enough that we protected Tum and Tara, we protected the fact that we wanted the food to be fully tithed, and they did not feel they're out of the system. And like we kept on learning, we are learning now the sugya, it wasn't that they were not God-fearing. People should understand, they lacked some knowledge because it's very complex, and they became lax a little bit. Okay, let's go over here. So this, we are referring back to the final case in the Mishnah Daf Chav Daled. This is important. The final case was that if you had, I'm going back a daf, Kadei Yain v'Kadei Shemen, right? Jugs of wine and jugs of oil. Top of Chafei, just on the top. Hamiduma ois. Now, miduma is a word which means intermixed. It's normally used when there's a mixture between chulin and truma. We don't use this word when it's mixture of chulin and kodesh. The case of the Mishnah must be that there is also some kodesh aspect involved. So here we said, now the final din of the Mishnah was not regarding the food, it was regarding the kalim. That the kalim, 70 days and closer to the Yom Tiv, we can trust the Amma Aretz when he says that it's not tummy, that it's tahor. So the Gemara wants to clarify. So in the way we jump into the sugya is quoting a braisa. The braisa is not clear, and they're going to clarify and see how this will shed light on the understanding of our Mishnah.
Right, 7 days before the Yantiv or before the pressing season?
70 days before the pressing season. Thank you for that correction. Yashakoyach. I want to correct it. 70 days before the pressing season. Because it was then that everyone was matayr the kalim, even the chavedim. Shkoyach. Okay. So says the Gemara Tanya, we learned in a Braisa, B'chlal, this is about Amaratzim, and again, it's not clear. And the Braisa says like this, that ein amanim, that Amaratzim are not trusted regarding the status of Tahara, not on their kankanim, not on their jugs. We're speaking about the jugs that are used for wine and for oil, etc. And v'loyala truma, and they're not trusted regarding truma, which is, by the way, which is what we learned in the Mishnah. Now, there are exceptions, right? During the pressing season, they are trusted. Now, the Gemara wants to clarify. This Braisa is speaking about which kankanim, which jugs, which utensils are we referring to? If we are speaking about the kankanim of Kodesh, if you remember what we learned at the end of last year, this concept that migu de mehemin on this, mehemin on that. 1 second, we learned that was the whole leniency, that they are believed regarding Kodesh. Because of Eimas HaKodesh, because there's going to be Eva. So, migu de mehemen ha-kodesh can be that the keli that's holding the wine that's kachim is going to be tamei. Doesn't make sense. Mehemen amiyal kankanim. Ella, we must be speaking about kankanim the truma. Why did the Braisa even have to say that? Pshita. This is a question. Hashta truma loy mehemen. If the truma, we say the truma is tamei, we don't trust them that it's started. Even truma, even though there's consequences, real consequences, right? The coin can't eat it; it has less value. So I can mehemen. So what does the Braisa mean? Ella, clarifying the Braisa. The Braisa is speaking about emptied vessels, bereikanim de kodesh. No, there was kachim in it. It became emptied, and this is even b'shar yemois hashana. So that's what the Braisa is being mechadesh. That we don't say that since when there was kodesh in it, because of the two reasons we just mentioned, Eva and Emas HaKodesh, we believe them that it's tahor. It doesn't mean that once the contents are emptied, the keli remains tahor. The moment there's no more kodesh itself, we go back to the general rule, kelim of an ama aretz, midrabanan is tamei. V'lo yala truma, I'm sorry, let me get, ubimeleim the truma. And when the Braisa says that they are not believed regarding the truma, or even the kankanim, if they can be filled with truma, and even though it's during the pressing season, what did we say during the pressing season? That what? That they are nemon for the truma. So the Braisa is machadish, they are only neman for the truma and not for the kelim. If you remember on Daf Chav Bey Yomid Beis, when Rabbi Yeshua says, Boishni midevreichem beishamai, that's similar. Like this is not like logical anymore. In other words, is it normally we're not going to separate the content and the keli. Sometimes we do. Sometimes, here's another example. No, it's for the truma. Why do they believe b'shas hagitois? So we said two reasons. Number one, everyone is metired the kalim, but that's not the only reason. That's not the only. If that would be the only reason, then the kalim would be tahar. There's another reason. Since most of the trumas and maasros are separated during the pressing season, if Chazal would keep their takana standing, that because of the minority of Amaratzim, it's a minority, that they don't know how to keep Tara, we can't trust them, then we're not going to trust that their Trumas Tahira, then a Chaver that's a Kohen won't have access to the Roiv of Trumas. So that reason only justifies them not imposing their takana regarding the food proper. But the Kalim, we still are Chayish, even though everyone takes their Kalim to, and even though the content is in the Keli. If the Keli is Tameh, it's going to make the content Tameh, but that's going back to Daf Chav Beis Amud Beis. Okay, now let's read our Mishnah. Says the Gemara, hold on, it says in our Mishnah, Kadayayin, the jugs of wine, the jugs of oil, Hamidu Ma'ois. Now what does Midu Ma'ois refer to? Normally Miduma means that there's a mixture of Trumas or Maasros. We don't use the words Midu Ma'ois when there's Kachim involved, normally. So my love, that Midu Ma'ois, the Truma. Now we got a problem. You know what the problem is? What does our Mishnah say? That the Kalim are tar, and Chevra not only tar during the Shas Hagitois, they're tar already 70 days prior. So how do you interpret the Braisa when it appears to be contradicting the Mishnah? So Amri Devei Rab Chia, that there's another knech, there's another wrinkle in our Mishnah. We spoke it out. Midumois doesn't only mean tevel, which is a mixture, let's say. No, there is also something that's going to be given to Kodesh. Not already Kodesh, it's going to be given to Kodesh. You can't give it to Kodesh because it's still tevel. Midumois means, Midumois the Kodesh. Where do we, and that's the whole rationale. Since the person, the owner, is declared that some of this will be given later to Kachim, that is another reason why there's going to be a Nemanus, Verstehst? And the Nemanus goes already 70 days before in the Keli, not prior to, because you need to have many reasons together. 70 days is also because since that's the time from when everyone is toiver the Kalim, so together with this, together with that, we say the Kalim is good. Where else do you find that we use the word dimua regarding Kachim? Amri devei Rabbi Eloi, we learned in the yeshiva of Rabbi Eloi, b'metayir estivloi litel mimenu nisachim. You're right. The word dimua refers to a mixture of truma and chulin, or tevel, not kodesh. So the Mishnah says that in the case where you have dimua, and there is also a hachlata to separate kodesh, that is the case of the Mishnah. So then we say that the kalim themselves are considered tahar, but not forever, not the whole year. If there is kachim, the whole year. Here it's only being set aside 70 days. Amar Abai Shmamino, that dino who, that you see that it's proper, the law is that the ilave arisa, that it's upon the sharecropper, the responsibility, lemitrach, to trouble himself or herself, agulfe, on the kalim, which have to be toiveled, everyone's kalim have to be toiveled, shivim yomim mekamim atzartam, for 70 days prior to the pressing. That's a choshen mishpadin. So let's say you have a worker. You have workers. You can tell them 70 days before, chevra, be metayir de kelim. And they can't say, we're going to do it next week. Because the goal was to have everything pure during the pressing season. But since people began to toivel 70 days prior, which makes a lot of sense, if everyone is going to rush to toivel all of their kelim that's needed in the pressing, just a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks before the pressing season, it won't work. There won't be enough mikvahs, there's going to be a line, there's going to be pressure. So since people did it 70 days prior, there's a side in that you have the right to force your sharecropper, not to force him b'koyach, to force him with the law. Do it now. Don't procrastinate.
They would make these jugs and then Or they buy these jugs first, toivel them, and drink
Oh, we're speaking about all of the utensils that are used during the pressing season, not only the jugs, but also the parts of the press itself. They would use it. It would be there the whole year, but every year, 70 days before the pressing season, everyone was obligated to toivel it. Again, that's for to make sure, right, Michael, that the Amaratzim don't feel disenfranchised. In other words, really, we wanted to make sure that the Amaratzim toivel the kelim. But if we would make it only on them, they would feel insulted. They made it, everyone has to do it. Good. Everyone was toiveling. Everything was done in a way. I'm just jumping me'ingen. There's so many people that come from Jewish ancestry. I know in the north of Brazil and all of these places, and there's an issue on their yichus, and when they're told to make a gedus lechumra, they get insulted. So one perhaps solution Mashiach will do is he'll make everyone do a gedus lechumra. I don't know. Everyone should go to the mikveh and be mekabel the mitzvahs. You know, in certain communities, when people are not observant and they go to be observant, they go to the mikveh to be mekabel the mitzvahs.
What do they have signs saying people come in the mitzvahs?
No, that means that people that were mekad of them. This is not in Lubavitch, but in other Hasidic groups. They tell them you're going there to be, you're going l'tfila, l'shem, kabbalah mitzvahs.
You need a basin for that?
All these pratim, in other words, you don't need a beis din, but sometimes you enact the law upon all, not to separate, not to point at a certain segment, which will get very insulting. Okay, Chavra, we gave the intro regarding the shortage of earthenware utensils, and because of the shortage of the earthenware utensils in Yerushalayim, specifically small ones. Small ones means the ones that were used in the eating of kachim. Okay, we'll see later on Daf Chavav, we have to get there, regarding large ones, but regarding small ones. Says the Mishnah. Again, the irony, that Truma is going to be more chamer than kachim. Min ha-moidiim v'lefnim. Moidiim is the city that's 15 mil away from Yerushalayim Erech Kodesh, and according to many Rishonim, it's not only Moidiim, it's any area that is 15 mil from any direction, but that's the example that we're giving. From there inwards does not mean the city itself. The Gemara is going to discuss the status of the city. Nemanim al kli cheres. We trust the Amoritz because of the short supply on these earthenware utensils, which constantly, when they were used, they became noisard and they needed to be broken. So now that you have them and they say it's tar, you believe them.
It's not jugs.
This is jugs, this is plates, these are cups, these are all utensils that people would regularly use when they would eat a meal.
They have to break the jugs as well.
Any klecheres that had in it, if there was wine that was kachim, anything that has kachim in it has an expiration date, yes. Outside Moedian, see, the Mishnah is making it clear that I'm not telling you Moedian itself. We're going to have to figure that out on our own. Then ein nemanim, they're not believed. And now nuance, keitza. Hakader means a potter. Someone who's manufacturing pots. Is that he sells pots. Now, Chevra, this person has a factory outside Moedian, away from Yerushalayim. But he now, after he manufactured his pots, he's coming in. It's not about where the factory is. Once he enters inside Moedian, so you would argue, hold on, this heter was only min ha-Moedian v'lachutz. Now, he made these pots outside Moedian. Maybe it's too late. No. If he is the one that manufactured it, not he bought it from the manufacturer, and these are the pots that were manufactured outside, and you are buying it directly from him, then it's okay. Neman. That's a big, in other words, if I'm the manufacturer and I made it outside and I sold it to you and you are selling it to the buyer, or if the buyer wants to sell it to another buyer, then it's not good anymore. Because if this pot would have been made, guys, you only can't have a kiln in the city proper. Between Moedian and Yerushalayim, there were kilns. So those pots that were made there were never declared tamei. There, you don't have to buy it from the manufacturer. Here, the Mishnah is adding another leniency that even if these pots were manufactured outside of Moedian, as long as the one who actually made it, he brought the pots, and you are buying it to use it from him, it's also okay. But Yatsa, let's go on the opposite. Even if there's a factory that is within Moedian and Yerushalayim. Those earthenware small utensils were never declared tummy. And someone, the one who made it, the buyer, walked it outside Moedian. That's it, done. Einon Eman. Okay. Says the Gemara Tana. We learned in a Braisa that which the Mishnah didn't add Bachlal. What about the city itself? Moedian itself. Pa'amem kelifnim, pa'amem kelachutz. And listen to the logic over here. Last line in the Amid. Keitzad. Kadar yoitzei. Kadar yoitzei means that he came from within Moedian. He was in between Moedian and Yerushalayim. That's where he has his factory. That means the pots there were never declared tummy. He's selling it. People outside Moedian also need these utensils. So if he went from inside to outside, but the way he goes from within Moedian to beyond is going through Moedian. So you found it in Moedian, but he came from within, back inside the Braisa, back into the last line of the Gemaras. And v'chaver nichnas. And the chaver, he's coming from, I don't know, Tiberias. He's coming from way be outside. And he's coming towards Yerushalayim, and they both meet in Moedian. He never had a time to buy it prior. I know that the Mishnah's heter began only from within Moedian. But the chaver didn't meet him there. The chaver is coming from without. He never had an opportunity to meet him prior. And you can't tell the chaver, go more in. No, the seller is going in the opposite direction. Rashi writes, Im lo yachshav emosai, it's now or never. So then you allow it, even though it's already in Moedian. It's not vilifnim min Moedian.
Why wouldn't they just use kalim made outside if they're not using it?
Kalim that were made outside are b'chlal not good if it was made by Am Haaretz.
They can use them for whatever they need to.
No, I'm saying you want to have kalim to eat kachim. You're going towards the Beis HaMikdash, you need to have a kalim. You're going to bring a shlamim, no, the Beis HaMikdash is not going to give you disposable utensils to eat with. That's on you. You have to make sure it's kosher. Including its start. Okay, so if you had no opportunity to meet him prior, then the city of Moedian itself is also treated leniently. However, if both of them are nichnasim, which means both of them are going from the outside to the inside, they're both going towards the Beis HaMikdash. So I tell the chaver, don't buy it in the city. Wait until you go closer to Yerushalayim. Why buy it now? Buy it later. Or, daf chavav, if both of them are leaving. If both of them are leaving means you had the opportunity to buy it prior. You didn't buy it before they entered Moedian, going from Yerushalayim towards outside. Since you had the opportunity and you didn't, we won't be lenient in the city of Moedian. Then kalachutz. And Amar Abaya, you know what? We can make the same inference from our Mishnah. It says in our Mishnah, Hakadr shemachras hakedeiros v'nichnas lifnim in Moedian. Etc., etc. So that basically is saying Tama, that we have Hetadim, is only because the Lefim and Hamoedian, which implies that Moedian itself is Loi Meheman. But then we have in the Seif of the Mishnah, Yatsa Einon Eman, which implies Hamoedian Gufa Neman. So the Mishnah not only doesn't mention it explicitly, the Mishnah by inference contradicts itself. So it must be that we have to make sometimes yeah and sometimes not, and this is logical. Elalav shmamino, kan b'kader yoytze v'chaver nichnas, and kan b'sheshneim yoytze v'shneim nichnasim shmamino. Nekuda. Okay. Now, Tani we learned in a Brais that Ne'emanim, the Am Haaretz, is trusted only b'chlicheres hadakin. But we didn't have that word in the Mishnah. Which means the typical utensils that are used while eating a meal. Only there is where they gave the heter, because you can't build a kiln in Yerushalayim, and because those which are used for kachim becomes nicer, they are constantly broken, so there's a short supply. But kalim, no one eats a meal in a large pot. I know you cook meals in large, but you don't eat it. There wasn't such a shortage. There was still a shortage, but not as much as. And also only for kodesh. In other words, for eating truma, that's the chumrah. Even small kalim, this guy's the same Am Haaretz, same manufacturer. And if I'm a kohen and I want a keli for truma, I can't believe him. The Chazal made a takana, again, not b'shas hagitois, I got that, and even we learned today, even b'shas hagitois only on the product, not on the keli. That kalim are not good. Okay. Amar Reish Lakish. Another detail. we're going to have two arguments between Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. When are we believed? When do we believe that Amoritz for Kodesh? What does small mean? Small means for Hushenetalam Yadei Achas. It's small that you can carry it with one hand. That's how you would define small. However, kalim that are large to the point that you normally would use two hands to carry it, which are kalim that were not regularly used for your private meal, so there isn't such a demand. There's no anguish if you won't find that as much. There's no heted. And Rabbi Yochanan disagrees. That Rabbi Yochanan no, afilu she'ein nitalim b'yadei achas, as long as people would cook. Let's go back to cooking. Well, you have to cook in it. So that also was included. What won't be included are super large ones. We'll get to that a little bit more later. There's another nuance about the big, even larger.
Commercial size.
Oh, very good. Commercial size. Very good. That is what's not included. If it's not commercial size, it's all included in the heter. Another machlekes. Amar Reish Lakish lo yishanu ela reikanim. Aval reikanim means we are speaking about kalim that are not full, but if they are milayim, guys, milayim means very important. Milayim with non-kachim. Milayim with non-kachim. What's the status of the food of an Amoritz? Tamei. So Reish Lakish doesn't want, even though we already learned today an exception, even though we learned on Daf Chav Beis an exception, he doesn't want for the status of the content and of the keli to have two different status. If it's filled with non-kodesh food, for which there's no nemanas on the food, then that keli is also not going to be tahor, even though you want to use it for kodesh. Verstehst? Aber Malayim loy. Okay.
What's Malayim?
Malay means full. But full with non-kodesh. Shlomo cooks mechanazai.
Because even though he's giving it to use for Kodesh?
Even though but I have both. The moment, since the food that's in it from the Amoritz, he's not believed for the food, non-kodesh food. So once non-kodesh food, which is, we consider it tamei, we got to consider the holder tamei as well. And Rabbi Yochanan disagrees. He says, afilu malayim with non-kodesh. And it goes even more. Afilu apikar susoi. Apikar susoi means the garment of the Amoritz. Now, Chevre, the garment of the Amoritz, we already had this in the beginning of the sugya, is called midrabanan. Midrabanan, a midras zov. All Amoratzim have a status of a zov. Now, by the way, there's a limit to that status, because normally that which the zov moves is also tamei, not by the Amoritz. I want to just quote. We'll need this later, but I'll quote it right now. Tosfos on daf Yutes Amid Beis. The Rabbeinu Tam says, I'm just reading inside Tosfos. The vadai einoi metame midras veheset. The Amoritz mishum takonas hashuk nagaba. If the Amoritz touches something, he'll make it tamei. But and we say his clothing have midrabanan the status of midrazov. But if the Amoritz moves something, like a kleicheres only inquires tuma from the inside air. But if a zav moves something, a kleicheres, he makes a tamei because he moved the inside air. Hesed. That was not said by the Amoritz, because if not, Tosfos says takanas hashuk, you won't be able to buy anything. It's going to hurt the economy too much. So let's go. The garment of the zav is inside the keli. The garment of the zav, my friends, is considered midrabanan av. You know what that means? It means that the keli is a rishon. We don't say that. We say that since this is a small keli, guys, we're speaking about min hamidin v'lefnim, those kelim remain tahor. V'amar Rava umayde Rabbi Yochanan b'mashkin atzman shehem tameim. Again, that the liquids that are not kodesh that are in there, the liquids are tamei. He's saying liquids because you should know that whenever liquids are tamei midrabanan, they always go back to being a rishon. That's midrabanan, and therefore they're matama the kelim midrabanan on the level of a sheni, which can be matama a shlishi, which can make a revi. Doesn't matter. We don't. Rabbi Yochanan says I don't need for the status of the content and the keli to be the same, and he quotes Daf Chav Beis Amud Beis and va'alta tama. Why? Sharei login mali mashkin. There we had a case where there was a mace, and what protected the tuma from going from one environment to the other was a kleicheres of Amoritz. And here the catch-22 was, when do we say that if the opening is closed, it separates the tuma, if that which is closing the opening itself is tar? The kleicheres of the Amoritz, midrabanan, should be tamei, so it should not protect. But if it's going to affect items which can never be kashered, oichlin, mashkin, and other klei cheres, then the amaratzim would feel, whoa, I got to make my own group. I'm going to make my own. They would separate themselves from us. So we made that, and the irony came out, login means a wooden loig, not a klei cheres. A wooden loig could be kashed. That if you have a wooden loig filled with mashkin, so we said in the case where the protection was coming from a klei cheres of Ha'ama Aretz, login Tameim, Tuma Shiva. Why? Because you can kasher it, and the mashkin are tahoiden. So what do we see? That we don't have to align the content and the keli. So the same thing will be over here. Okay, moving on to the next mission.
When you have a kli cheres, the liquid's going to go into the kli cheres and it won't come out.
Correct.
So you have tummy liquid going into the kli cheres?
No, actually here it's the opposite. Here the mashkin is tahor. Just here it's the opposite. You're talking about the case of Rabbi Yechanan or the... Yeah, correct. Very good, very good.
So tummy liquid goes into the kli cheres.
Yes,
you can use it for kodesh.
yes, I could, because it's only tummy midrabanan. It's only tummy midrabanan. The Ha'ama Aretz is saying it's tahor. See, we have to... The Ha'ama Aretz... People have it wrong. The Ha'ama Aretz, it's not that we don't trust them at all. There's a challenge. So they were machmir, they were not machmir regarding the kelim. I mean, you get very good.
Just ask him, and he says, yeah, it's tahor.
Always, guys, if the Ha'ama Aretz is not testifying that it's tahor, then there's nothing to talk about. Everything is tummy. Okay, next Mishnah. Look at this case. Ha-gaboim, with the greatest love we have to all of the gaboim. Here, gabai means a tax collector. You should know that tax collectors were frowned upon then. It's very different than today. The way the system worked was that the government, the king, we're speaking about a non-Jewish king, he wouldn't go to every individual to collect tax because it was hard to find individuals. He would go to a city and say, the government, from this city I want X amount of money from tax. A wealthy person would pay all of that money to the king, and he would now act as the agent of the king to collect taxes. Now obviously he didn't try to collect just that which he laid out. He would collect, and it would sometimes be not that fair. Okay? Now a chaver would not become a gabai because it was a very dishonest work then. I'm not speaking about today, a person works for the federal government, it's different. Okay, so a gabai, which was Ha'ama Aretz, and Rashi adds a very important detail, that he was working for a non-Jewish king, because you should know that tax collectors for Jewish governments by Jewish law may never enter your home. But there they had a lot of koyach. Now what was the fear? Let's say I owe tax, or he decided that I owe tax, or he needs money, so he's going to come collect tax from me. He would enter my home against my will, and he would basically take anything he wanted. So do I have to have a chashash that he touched all my kelim? And if he did, because of the rabbinic tumah of the Ha'ama Aretz, maybe all my kelim now are tummy. So hagaboyim shenichnasu l'toich habayis. Case number one. Case number two. V'chein haganovim. We're going to presume that ganav is also an Ha'ama Aretz. What's the issue? A person never has a geneva. Now the ganav is doing tshuva. The ganav is returning the kelim. What status does the keli have? Zok the Mishnah, Ne'emanim loimer loy noganu. We believe them when they say that they didn't touch. So let's go. So I want to one second. No. So let's hold on. The gabai will say, I never touched it. So you believe him. What about the ganav? The ganav, what do you mean he didn't touch it? He took it, he's giving it back. It means that if he stole a klei cheres, and we just quoted the Tosfos, even though an Ha'ama Aretz has a din of a midrabanan, but he's not metama beheset. He's only metama through touch. Earthenware utensils never become tameh if the touch was only in the outside. The ganaf is saying, I never touched the inside of the of this keli. Says the Mishnah, you believe them. Nemanim loimer loy noganu. Wow. Now 1 second. What are we talking about? I don't understand. My friends, don't we say that Ha'ama Aretz is not believed b'chlal? Why is he believed here? Because here we are speaking about this heter that they gave la kodesh. It comes to kodesh, that's what we're talking about. Let's go back. Ha'ama Aretz is believed la kodesh. So even if he's a gabai, if he's a tax collector, if he says I didn't touch it, that keli remains pure la kodesh, Rashi says. The keli that the ganav stole, that he returned, is tar la kodesh. Ubeirushalayim nemanim, not only al hakodesh ala kodesh in Yerushalayim. Now, what are we talking about? So now we have to add, Rabbeinu HaKadosh keeps everyone on their toes. That means that even though until now, as the Gemara clarified, the Mishnah that we learned today is only speaking about Klei Cheres Hadakin. Guys, even according to Rabbi Yechanan, even though it means Kalim that you need to have two hands to take it, but it's small, now we're adding another leniency that in Yerushalayim, even super large earthenware utensils, commercial nisanel, they are believed to say only in Yerushalayim that it's not tamei, because again there were no killings in Yerushalayim. I know that, so there's a short supply in Yerushalayim. They're believed for even large ones, and now this is the final line: Ubeshas haregel afalat truma. That during Yom Tiv they are believed altogether, even for truma. As for truma, there's no heter. Guys, for chulin it's a less chiddush. Because the worst case scenario by chulin is nothing near the worst case scenario by truma. Truma is tameh, you're not allowed to eat it. You believe them during the regel. Let's go in the Gemara. So first of all, the Remini, the Mishnah here in Chagiga tells us that a tax collector and a ganev, they have a certain amount of namanas regarding kachim. Hold on. The Reminu, we have a Mishnah now from Taharois. Hagaboyim shenichnu salotei chabayis. There were tax collectors in Chagiga, you have tax collectors in Taras. Vum Legate, you have tax collectors. So the din is Chabayis Kuletame. No, it's the Mishnah says you presume this guy, the tax collector, what is he doing? He's looking at all your things to decide, to determine how much money he's going to tax you for. Answers the Gemara Loi Kasha. The Mishnah in Taharois is where the Jew tax collector that's working for a non-Jewish king is going with a goy, the Ika goy bahadayu. Generally, there were censors in the Gemara would always exchange the word goy to akum. But here, it didn't happen, at least. In other words, even the censors, the goyim, they started to learn Chagiga, Arasugya, they became so overwhelmed, they stopped learning it. So they kept the word goy. They goy badayu. Oh, and what's the word? So the goy, in other words, the Jew, we are presuming will have rachmanas on you, the landowner. He's going to look a little bit, he'll find what he wants to find, and he'll leave. If a goy is with him, the goy is going to say, no, let's go through the whole house. Going through means not just looking, touching. So when there's a goy, mistama, he touched everything. Our Mishnah is, and ha deleka goy bahadayu. And our Mishnah is where there's no goy, he's believed. And the Tanan, clearly another Mishnah in Taharois, im yesh goyim mohem. Another detail. Nemanim loimer loy nichnasnu. In other words, guys, the second Mishnah that we're quoting now, see, our Mishnah is only regarding Tadas. Only regarding Tadas. What about not regarding Tadas? Not regarding a Kodesh. Our Mishnah is about Kachim. Not about Kachim. Once the tax collector entered my house, we say everything is tummy. Not regarding Kodesh. This Mishnah that we're quoting is speaking about another scenario. I never even knew the tax collector entered my house. I don't even know that. The tax collector comes and tells me, I want you to know, Loi nechnasnu. We were in the neighborhood. I did you a favor, I didn't even enter your house. So that's the classical case of hapesha asar hu hapesha hitir. In other words, you don't know that he entered the house. He is telling you he was in the neighborhood. He's telling you that there might have been a problem, but I didn't enter your house. So either believe him or don't believe him. If you don't believe him, there's no problem. If you believe him, there's no problem. But the moment the moment he himself says we entered your house, then we no longer can trust that he didn't touch. The goy, the yid, the Jew. Okay. The point is, and why is that? Im yesh goyim mohem. If there's no goy with him, then we also trust him when he says nechnasnu avaloi noganu. Why? Hapesha hatar hapesha hit. But here clearly you see that there's a difference between whether there's a goy, whether there's no goy. Now, what's the logic behind it? So there's two approaches. Rabbi Yechanan and Rabbi Elazar. One of them says, a masgoy aleim. Oh, it's the tax collector buddy. He's going to tell you 1 second, just because he's Jewish, you're not going through all his things. He's going to impose on him to search through the whole house. The other one of these two Amoraim says, no, he's not afraid of his colleague, of his buddy, of his working partner. He's afraid that the guy is going to report the Jew tax collector to the government. He's going to say, this Jew right, is a racist. When he goes into the house of the other Jew, he doesn't look as much. Emas malchus aleim. And the Gemara says there's a big nafkamina. Ike benayu goysha eno chashuv. That means if you're the senior partner, and this guy is a rookie, he's on the first day on his job. If the concern is only about your buddy, then attacker won't make a difference. If the concern is that he might report on you, it doesn't matter who he is. Okay. The Chain back in the Mishnah, that if you have ganovim that stole klei cheres and they returned it to you, guys, this is all regarding kodesh. Only regarding kodesh. They are believed to say we never touched it inside. We have a Mishnah that says Haganovim shenichnasu loteicha bayis. When ganovim enter the home, and you can notice, sadly, whoever had a geneva will notice. You'll know where the ganovim went because they go into a house and they make a churban there. So the Mishnah says that Eino Tomei Elamokim Derisas Ragle Haganovim. Means if you notice, they ransacked, if that's the word, bedroom number 1, bedroom number 2. But they see they didn't enter bedroom number 3, then everything there is start. But on the other hand, wherever they did go, what is it mashma? Everything is Tomei. What does our Mishnah say? That they are believed to say that we didn't touch the inside. There it's mashma that wherever we know they walked, everything is Tamei. So answers the Gemara, Amarav Pinchas. In the name of Rav, what do we have? What's the other girsa here? Or in the name of Rabba, very good. Interesting. I have Rav, and I have Rabba, and I have Rava. Very good. I have all the three. So then, Kisha'asu tshuva. Our Mishnah is they did tshuva. If you walk, God forbid, someone walks into the home and they notice that there was a break-in. We're speaking about a place where the Ganovim are Jewish, so they are presumed midrabanan tumas ha'aretz. Aside of the Geneva, things are tummy. Wherever you see they walked. But our Mishnah is speaking about the Ganav returned the Keli. And he's telling you, I moved it. And again, Tumas Ha'aretz is like a Zov, but not fully like a Zov. He's not Matama Beheset. He can only be Matama de Kli if he touched it in the inside. He's saying, I never touched it. You believe him. And Daikamami, the Ktani Shechziru was Hakelim. Shechziru means, Ein L'cha Tshuva Gedoyla Mizu. Not he did Tshuva only in his heart. Since he returned to Scalim, if a person is doing tshuva, he'll be honest now. He's not going to say something. He's coming forward. He's revealing that he's the ganef, and he's coming and telling you that I didn't touch it. That's why you believe him.
Is there another difference where here he's testifying and saying lo naganu, and the remini that we're quoting is just that you see that this was ransacked and that wasn't ransacked. You don't have to ask him.
You presume that he touched everything. And even if you were to chop him, we're saying, and catch him, we won't believe him anything. And in our Mishnah, since he on his own is returning it, that's why there's more nemanis. Okay. Now, when you read this line in the Mishnah, you don't understand what we're talking about. What do you mean you believed on kodesh? So we added. It means for ilim, even klei cheres. It's all about klei cheres because of the shortage. But even the gasim, the big ones. So tana nemanim al klei cheres gasim la kodesh, and not for truma, never for truma. Why do we have these leniencies? Now, this Gemara's question isn't only for the Mishnah Daf Chavav. This Kol Kach is also on the Mishnah Daf Chafayim base. Like, why, Kodesh has a higher standard. To be more machmed by Truma, why? We spoke it out. She'ein oisim kivshoynois b'Yerushalayim. Since Chazal did not allow for there to be this type of factory in Yerushalayim itself, which meant, and add to that the klei cheres, which was the most common, because it was the cheapest keli that was used for the consumption of kachim, always needed to be broken. You ate a meal, you broke the kelim. So there was a real shortage. So because of that, they needed to be lenient. Now, the final din in the Mishnah was, during Yom Tov, they are believed, even regarding the status of Truma, when they say it's Tahar. Where do we have this from? What's the source? I'm Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. To Amar Krom, Vaye Yosef, Kol Ish Yisrael, El Ho'ir, Ki Ish Echad Chaverim. Now, the context of that verse is not so happy. But what do we learn from that pasuk? That whenever all of the people are gathered, whenever there's Vayei Osef, then the Torah considers everyone Chavedim. Chavedim, not only the pshat of friends, Chavedim meaning the status of a chaver, that HaKosuv Aso on Kulam Chavedim. B'Shas HaRegel, not the same time. Shuki corrected me when I convoluted that. No, this is a new din. And this din, Shlem, is the reason why we're learning all of these halachas in Chagiga. But since during the Chagiga, the Chazal said that this is an asmachta, this is a pure asmachta. The whole takana of Tumas Amaretz is midrabanan. Everything is midrabanan. That we consider everyone chaverim. That's why we're learning about this in the Masechtas Chagiga. And by the way, that took away, it brought more chavershaft. It also, and the negative, people did get ashamed when they were viewed as Amaretz. You know that you walk into an environment, go into any Haredi shul today. If your hat doesn't match, if your jacket doesn't match, they'll ashame you. Either they'll say it to you or they'll think it to you. So it's uncomfortable. They're very judgmental. And they're like this, they lowered it, not so judgmental. And that brought people the way people should really be. Okay, Chavah, we have time, let's keep on going. Says the Mishnah, and we already mentioned this in the intro, that hapoisech es chavisoy, du bist chavid, and you have, that's Yerushalayim HaKodesh. All of you go to Mea She'arim, you go to Geula, and Yom Tov is really your season of business, and everyone is buying product. Problem is, again, as things are packaged today, things were not packaged then. So you had this big barrel, you the storekeeper, and everyone who bought something would take their own keli, they would stick it in the barrel. When you would buy wine, today it's Cabernet and Merlot, then it would be, and the grease of Chaim, and then that of Yankel. Everyone, had some input in the wine. Everyone touched the wine. Everyone touched the flour. And by the way, many Rishonim say that our Mishnah is dafka speaking about wine and flour, which are the most important items that you need over Yom Tov. Wine for Kiddush, flour for... whether this applies to all other food items is a big machlokes Rishonim. But let's read the Mishnah. So you, the chaver, you opened up your big chavis, everyone touched it, or you began, when you sold dough, means you made dough, how it worked. You made the dough, and the customers would stick their clean fingers into your dough without the plastic gloves that never existed, and they would take the amount of dough that they needed. In other words, when you're selling these products, the customers are constantly touching it. Al gav haregel, you're doing it over Yom Tov. Now we just learned in the last Mishnah that what? That during the regel, everyone has a status of a chaver. It doesn't mean that they're not tamei. It means that even though they're tamei, they cannot impart tumah, or we suspend the tumah. So the question is, what happens after the Yom Tov? What do you do afterwards? With everything that during Yom Tov was touched by the Amaratzim. Rabbi Yehuda says Yigmar. Why Yigmar? Why Yigmar? Because if you won't be allowed to keep on selling it in the state of Tara, then you're going to start, you the shopkeeper, you're going to start approximating. It's already the third day Cholamoyed. I'm not going to sell this because Mistama, I won't sell all of it prior. And then I'm going to be stuck with Tamei. And that's going to diminish the amount of supply during Yom Tov. So they were mater, soifan, atu, tchilasan. And the Chachamim say absolutely not. Lo yigmor. Look inside Rashi, one line under the Gemara. Lo yigmor zakt Rashi, achar regel. Afal pi sheberegel heim tahirim. Even though during Yom Tov everything was tahar, second line under the Gemara, look inside Rashi, lo ishe taharasan tahara. It's not that amaratzim are really pure. Ela sheberegel hakol chaverim. You see Rashi's words? Avo la'achar haregel. Guys, no one touched it after Yom Tov. No one touched it after Yom Tov. They touched it during Yom Tov. So says Rashi explaining the Chachamim ma'agoi tomei lemafreya. Now Rashi's girsa in the Mishnah was that the Mishnah quoted Rabbi Yehuda second. That's why in Rashi. And Rabbi Yehuda, so Rashi quotes what we learned in Beitza, Gimel Devarim Hutru Seifan Mishum Tchilasan, and this is one of them. In other words, if you're not going to be matir for you to continue to sell it in the state of Tara, then you're going to be very careful, and at some point you'll stop selling product. And we wanted for Yerushalayim to be filled with food with an abundance during Yom Tov. Let's start reading the Gemara. Says the Gemara, Yosef, Rav Ami, and Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha, they were sitting akila on the porch of Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha. Pasach Chad v'Amar. Okay, what did we learn 2 days ago or last day? About the truma. He's not neman b'shasa, only neman during the times of the pressing. So he said that which wasn't, you can't buy it afterwards, but you can buy it later. Here, same question. So he asked the question, Mao sheyanichenu l'regel acher. Guys, this question is lachachamim. According to Rabbi Yehuda, there's nothing to talk about. According to the chachamim, okay, you can sell it now, but certain things, maybe not the isa. I don't know how the dough stays fresh, but the wine can be even better. Maybe save the wine for later. Amalei idach, the other one, whichever one was the listener, didn't completely disregarded the question. He says the question is absurd. He says hakoil memashmer ba. Everyone touched it during the regel. And again, I know that he's not tahor. Big said hakol chavedim, but he's not tahor. So he says va'at omrat yanichenu leregel acher. It's tamei. Omalei, I don't understand. But during Yom Tov itself, people were not touching it. So Amalei, how can you compare one case to the other? During Yom Tov proper, Tumas am ha'aretz baregel. Look at the words, my friends. Rachmana tihara. You know when we normally use, what does Rachmana normally refer to? The Oibishter. It is the Oibishter, but it's beautiful that we are using this expression on God all through the Chachamim. No, it's the Chashash Tumas Midrabanan, and this leniency is Midrabanan. We're calling this the merciful one was Metayed. Elo Hashta, but now that it's after Yom Tov, in other words, Yom Tov didn't prevent, it doesn't prevent, it just, let's say, Yom Tov deactivates the Tumah. After Yom Tov, the Chachamim say, Rashi says, it's reactivated lemafreya. Once it's reactivated, next Yom Tov, how can you remove it? If it was never tamei, that's also the Rashi in the Tosfos we began in yesterday's share. That even though we said like l'kodesh, they're nemanim, it's that they were makadosh it from when they pressed it. Because if when they made the wine and the oil, they made it l'chulin, and it's tamei, just because they declare it kodesh, you can't remove the tumah. It's the same logic. Now that it's after the Yom Tov, you can't remove the tumah once it's tummy. Okay, now is it that way? You know what we're going to learn over the next 2 minutes? That we're going to reject this, and it's actually going to be the way we'll learn the Gemara. It's not that way. Even l'chachamim, it's not that way. So the Gemara begins by saying that maybe that's a machlokes tanoi. The Tana Chadet says beferish yanicheno l'regel acher. Tanya idach. Lo yinichenu l'regel acher. Now l'chayre, that's the machlokes. So my love, tanoi. So the Gemara says loy. We're going to go one way and then we're going to go the opposite way. Approach number one. Ha diktani yanichenu. The brayso that says leave it for the next Yom Tov goes to the shita of Rabbi Yehuda. Guys, what will be the problem with this? What will be the problem with this? What does Rabbi Yehuda say in our Mishnah? You can finish it right after Yom Tov. You don't have to wait. Yanichenu l'chayre is mashma that you can't sell it after Yom Tov, but you wait until the next Yom Tov. The Gemara is going to therefore reverse. And the one that says lo yanichenu is the Rabbanan, which would mean, that's what he was saying, that according to the Rabbanan, once it's tamei, it's tamei. So the Gemara says, is that logical? The punkt fakert. Rabbi Yehuda says yigmar. You can't say that the brayso that words the words yanichenu is Rabbi Yehuda. It must be the opposite. Elo ha diktani lo yanichenu. Lo yanachenu doesn't mean you may not use it for the next Yom Tov. It means you don't need to wait until the next Yom Tov. Is Rabbi Yehuda fakert? And even the Chachamim that are machmer, that say that what? That after Yom Tov it's tamei. There is only one brayso that's saying yinichenu l'Rabbanan. My lo yinichenu shein tzaranu lanich. So it's beautiful. It comes out that according to this conclusion, the way we're learning it, we resolve it. That even the Chamor opinion, which is the Rabbanan, are moide, you only cannot be yigmoidet after Yom Tov. But the Chachamim have the power not only to say that there's no chalois tumah, even though between one regel and the other, it's considered tamei midrabanan, when the next Yom Tov comes, the Chachamim, let's go, retroactively undo the prior retroactive tumah. That's the power of the Chachamim. That's the ultimate tshuva. That retroactively we're going to uproot tumah and we're going to bring Tara into our pre-Mashiach world. May that happen today. Amen. And we're going to continue we're going to conclude the final daf, God willing, Sunday morning.